Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Select's webinar, A Day in the Life of an Allocator Using AI. I'm Andrea Morgan, and I am joined by Sean Goldson, who is our Senior Director of Technology at Select. Sean is going to be sharing a demo of the solution, as well as talking about where and how AI is used across the solution suite. That'll take about 30 minutes. And then at the end, we've left 15 minutes for questions. But feel free as we go through this to add any questions. Under your control panel, you should see the ability to add questions. So go ahead and enter those, and we'll answer as many questions as we can during the session. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Select really focuses on optimizing inventory decisions. So we look at what and how much to buy with our plan and buy optimization tool, where to place inventory with our allocation optimization tool, and where to fulfill an online order from with our fulfillment optimization tool. All of these are built on a common platform, and that platform has a lot of patents, as well as has won a number of awards. At the bottom here of the page, you'll see 2 awards that were given to our customers, actually the allocation teams at our customers recently, for the results that they have achieved with the allocation tool itself, which leads quite nicely with sort of starting into what is the value that you can expect to see from from allocation optimization. So typically when we're looking at allocation, we are looking at improving 3 key things or measuring that. The first is full price sell-through, and these are examples on the conservative side that our customers have measured as they work through these projects. So 2 to 5% increase in full price sell-through. The second is really around allocation accuracy, which is really all about, where I send the receipts, am I better aligned to where they're going to sell? And then finally, margin improvements, which is typically we see about 1 to 5% margin improvements. But in addition to that, some of the softer benefits would be things like it's really takes a lot less time and especially on manual tasks. So when you look at the demo itself, you'll see a very, very simple process. And the smart is really all in the background, really providing this deep understanding of what's the really granular needs down at that store, and then for style, color, and size. And then really providing the ability for the allocators to be empowered with the data as they think about not just one product, but looking across multiple products. Just to give you an idea of how long this takes to implement, typically you're getting very rapid ROI, so it takes 3 to 6 months till you can start measuring the types of the value that we're talking about on the left-hand side. And the strength of this is that you're not actually ripping and replacing anything. You're actually augmenting your existing solutions. So I will show you examples of that as we go through this. But as I was saying, the key to all of this really comes in the AI, or the artificial intelligence. So just to kind of give everyone, I know this is used in a lot of different ways. So when we talk about AI, this is really typically defined as the ability of a machine to perform cognitive functions like a human. So the ability to understand, to reason, to learn, and to problem solve. And within this type of solution, we're focused a lot on machine learning and deep learning. And so really just sort of simply put, what this is all about is rather than having to be taught to perform an action step by step, the machine or the models can be programmed to think like us, to be able to learn based on observing, on classifying data, and learning from mistakes. So that's really sort of at the core of what it is that's really serving up a lot of the recommendations and the smarts behind this. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a practical example about how AI adds value. The first one here is that with AI, you're able to take into account a lot more data sets. So we always kind of get asked, well, can we take into account weather, foot traffic, etc. So it allows you to take into account both structured and unstructured data sets. And the real strength of this is that the AI will identify for you what is the most relevant data sets. And it also allows you to get down to the much lower granular level of detail. So we'll talk a little bit later about one of the key things that we're seeing as people look to shop differently. We need to be able to look at not just what they're going to get from walk-in sales, but also from buy online, pick up in store. So as you think about the allocation, we have to get down to that granular level as well as size, etc. The AI will also then help pick up a lot of the context and the trends and continue to learn. So that's really sort of the basis of that. And this quote that's from one of our customers, I think really brings a lot of this together, because, a lot of the allocators really start to feel that they now have the strategic voice of the store, because that very granular insights become available. And so they become, a big partner for the buyers who typically know the product really well. And now the allocators can actually provide the insights, the store insights on each of these products. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sean.
Thanks very much, Andrea. All right, so as you guys all know, allocation it's not a simple job, right? Even when you look at the day-to-day tasks that you're doing, you've got large volumes of merchandise coming in that you need to handle on relatively short time frames. These could be anything from a set of POs, ASNs, DC inventory, and a WMS, etc. And the other challenge is you've got lots of data that you might need to use as the actual underlying store need basis, the demand calculation, depending if it's fashion, seasonal, or core merchandise. A lot of things potentially have changed since the plan was created, right? For new products, history may not apply. You may have to go find a comparable product from last year. There may be no early read on trend yet, or you have to go to your e-commerce channel to find that information. Store demand is pretty volatile at times and doesn't oftentimes follow the averages of a store group. And then you've got even things like collections and looks that you might need to consider together. Oh, and by the way, your online channels like buy online, pick up in store, and ship from store are also skewing that demand picture. So these are just some of the challenges that you may face every day. And what we want to talk about is how we can help with that process here. So when we talk about what do we need to allocate today, right? When you walked in the morning here, there's many variants of allocation scenarios that you probably handle. Here's a few common subsets, right? The primary one that we're going to look at today is around a common and challenging task, a new product introduction, a short life cycle style that may never have been sold before, with limited or no existing sales today, and maybe a set quantity of inventory that you've already purchased. And we now need to figure out where's the right stores to put this, balancing constraints, et cetera, that we need to work within to maximize the overall sell-through and revenue at the end here. So to do that, right, when you actually break it down, you most likely have lots of steps that you may be going through on a day-to-day basis to get that job done. You'll take a look on the left-hand side there, right? Anything from that selecting the merchandise, deciding which data to look, which we just talked about there, any adjustments that you need to do, how much should you put out today versus 4 weeks from now, et cetera. Look at the store eligibility, manually considering are there any other things that we should change to mix the right products together, size curves, et cetera. A lot of things that you're going to be going through. And as you can see on the right, we've tried to really simplify it by taking the painful parts out, making it easier to do, doing a lot of the data work for you, which we'll give you some examples of here, and still give you better outcomes in the end. So to give you an example, I'm actually going to take you right to the demo right now and run you through a very simple, fast allocation scenario to start with. Okay, so I'm starting off at the home screen of our cloud-based, easy to implement suite of solutions. And today we're going to focus on allocation. So when we come in here, and I'm going to take you through this real quickly at first, and then we're going to spend more time on each of the steps after. The first thing is I want to find the right type of merchandise that I want to use. And today I had to work on our sunglasses. I'm going to put it out to our retail store channel, and I want to see what inventory do I have today to work with. Now, the first thing I might want to do is only work on the fashion products, which we can see it's already been filtered to this subset. And then I only want to look at new initial product introductions. Select all. Look at and confirm that the store eligibility, and we've only got maybe 40 or so out of 130 stores that are eligible for this product. That's what we see in the breadth here. And then we optimize. So now we're actually doing all the data crunching for you. And we're going to spend a lot more time on this later on here. The optimization process, in the end, gives me the output that says for specific products, for specific stores, what's the right place to put each unit of merchandise, right? This is both, we're gonna see it at the style color level. For example, the yellow sunglasses, I can now see which 9 stores out of the limited set of inventory I have are the right places to put these. And we can also look at it by the store view. So I can just look at specific stores and understand what merchandise they're getting. It's that simple. That was easy, right? That took maybe 2 minutes at most. Now, what you may be asking though is, what's different from this approach versus other tools that you've using today or that you've used before in the past? So let's take this again, step by step, and explain what's really going on under the covers here with the advanced science beneath this simple interface that I just showed you there. So let's start, in order to do that, let's start with the first step. We're gonna select some merchandise to allocate. I'm gonna give a little bit more insight on how that works. So as part of selecting the merchandise, we're gonna give you a really flexible and simple way to select a grouping of styles based on any criteria, from the most simple, select all, to the most complex. Either way, a lot of the following work has been done for you, right? First off, you'll see all the information describing your products, no matter what sources it may come from. So we're actually going to give you more information up front from a variety of different places, and we pull it all together for you. We're going to give you the flexibility of how you want to look at the data, to look at the products and find the right set. And then lastly, and oftentimes very importantly here, is that once the work list is created, it's a set of products that aren't just a batch that we're going to go through one by one and apply a standard process to those. It's actually a set of products that are considered all simultaneously in regards to how they actually interact with each other in the locations that you're going to be putting them. And we're going to discuss the innovations and optimization that implies later on and tell you really why that works a lot better. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the screen here. I'm going to start over, and I'm going to go start typing in here. So this works just like a search engine that you guys are probably familiar with type ahead, etc. And I'm going to go look for my men's knits department. I'm going to stick in the retail channel, but here's where you actually could look at different sources or different destination channels that inventory may already have been designated for. If you've got specific channels that inventory is already divided up for, you can use those. If you're pooling it together, like companies are starting to do, Select can also actually give you insights around what's the right quantity at the channel split level first, before splitting between stores, DCs, etc. But again, for today, we're going to stick with the retail channel, my retail stores, and I'm going to get candidates now. So what we're seeing, if I scroll down a little bit here, is an entire set of different products that you've got available. In this case, they're designed or defined by purchase orders. Now, a couple things that I'll point out. First off, inventory may be organized by packs. You know, in this case here, we've got packs that are based on 6 units each per pack, as well as loose inventory. And we handle at the optimization process both of those types of scenarios. Now, I've got flexible ways to sort and filter this list that I'm looking for. I can type in, as you saw me do before, any string that I want, and it will only filter the list to show me values that match that. I can sort any of these columns if I wanted to sort by something like a delivery date or size of available units. Or I've also got what we call this advanced filters. This is a way to build a relatively complex query, you know, but instead of having to enter query language in an engine or do pivot tables or something like that, you just choose, great, I'd like to choose based on my delivery type, select the ones that you want, perhaps style name or tier of store that it's intended for. Any data that describes your inventory, you can use to build a very complex set of criteria here. But today, I'm actually just going to do it the simplest and easiest way. I'm going to do it in one click. I'm going to select this button, say any initial equals true. And what it's done is it's filtered and pre-selected all of those for me. And that's what I see up now in the summary screen at the top. So at the summary level here, I see the available quantity of inventory. It's 4 POs. That actually makes up 3 style colors because one of those POs, two of those POs are for the same style color. And I also see a size range here. So what we're seeing here is how many units and the percentage of the overall pool of inventory that I'm working for are in each of these sizes. The last thing that I'll focus on this screen is this idea of a reserve quantity, or holdback is another term. You may not always want to allocate all the quantity up front. You may be wanting to either hold it back for a follow-on allocation or potentially for use in the e-commerce channel. Celect actually has, if I come back over here, as part of that review and recommended holdback step, you can either enter it yourself, or we actually have several methods that we can give you advice and recommendations from, such as predicting the necessary quantity for you up front based on target sell-through or something like that. But again, for today, we're going to focus on allocating all this inventory to stores. Okay, so next step in the process, adjusting constraints and store eligibility. Store eligibility is pretty simple, right? Some stores or groups, maybe the only ones that have a fixture for certain types of products, as an example. Some customers, only certain stores carry shoes, as an example, or only certain stores carry accessories. Whatever that is, whether it's eligibility or required stores, that's an input to the allocation system. But now let's talk about constraints. So what is a constraint, you ask? We actually consider constraints to be any sort of guardrails or limits that you'd like the optimization engine to work within. Instead of you having to decide every time as you're going through your job, does my output here meet the available criteria? Do I need to adjust it? Am I over allocating to one store based on my need calculation and I need to manually dial that down? Now, where should I put those leftover units there? You set these constraints or limits once, and then we do all the work, guaranteeing that you're always within those constraints and then still getting the best answer that obeys all the limits that you have. So let's take a look at this right now. So I click the Add Constraints button as the next step in that process. And again, you always see that you've got the back option available. You can always go back and forth between every step. So what I'm seeing here is that I have the option to preview constraints that have already been loaded. For example, such as store eligibility. Some stores are eligible for 3 of these styles that I have available, others only 2. This can range from, as I mentioned before, these required stores and so on. But other constraints as well may be implicit. You may not even see them on this screen. That could be something such as reflecting a store that's recently been closed for renovation, as an example. And you obviously shouldn't be sending any product to that. That's already done automatically behind the scenes. You don't even need to worry about it here. The other types of constraints, though, are ones where you can actually explicitly make a input, and you can, for example, adjust quantities that you want to have minimums for certain stores, depth, size runs. Really, anything that you can actually give us information around can be embodied as a constraint here. Again, you see advanced filters. I could set a certain constraint for only hot climate stores, as an example, or based on volume band, whether it's G, F, E, my lower volume stores, I could set certain constraints for those and different constraints for other volume bands. But in this case here, I'm actually going to not set any. What I'm going to be doing is leaving this set to the defaults. And what we're doing by doing that is that we're giving the engine as much leeway as possible. The more constraints you set, the less room to improve you have, and also the more work that you have to do anyway. Okay, so we've talked about constraints and eligibility. The next step is really the point where we start to tell the engine what to do here. So we're going to click Optimize. And what's going on here is that while we're doing the work for you, which again, as you saw in the previous one, often takes less than a minute, let's talk about what's going on here. So the first part here, understanding the need. We talked about this earlier, but a real common challenge is getting the right data together from many places. It could be in reports, it could be in a BI tool, it could be in Excel, And you may need to also decide on things like what time frames to use. Earlier this season, some time frame last year, etc. Select's patented platform, we do this automatically. The engine, we are able to consume all the data that you have. We've already gathered it together, received it from you, cleansed it, put it all together, etc. The engine will automatically identify the right data based on not just the relevant timeframes and so on, but also how predictive and relevant it is. It's accommodating new data updates, weekly sales as we go on through the season, inventory that was available, etc. And we're also new data types. You may have a clienteling application in your store where you want to feed information to us around what types of products people are looking for in your stores, asking for, but didn't have in inventory. Now, part of the demand prediction process that we've been talking about here, a key piece of this, which we'll cover a little bit later on, is context. Meaning, when we're looking at transactions, what's the context of that? What was the assortment? Or when I'm making an allocation, what's the context that these products will be inserted into in stores? We want to look across all different channels, accommodate for early detection of trends and the seasonality, right? You're obviously a given week at the end of November around Black Friday is a lot different than a given week at the end of July, as an example. And lastly, we want to be able to make sure we handle things like collections and looks where products may need to be grouped together, but don't necessarily need to be allocated together. So now, this is probably not a uncommon sentiment. Why is demand prediction hard? Right? People have been doing demand prediction for a long time, right? There's a lot of variables that can impact the outcomes of what actually sold in stores from the data that we have. There's this idea of what we call sparse and volatile data. Sparse data means that if you look at a given store, an individual style, color, size may not sell in that store in any given week or two, right? At the aggregated style level or class level, you've got trends, but it's hard to pull out signal, the information that gives you something predictive of value from data in such sparse contents. You've also got the volatility, right? One store may be very different this year for a specific individual style than it was last store or even compared to a comparable store. So basing the decisions, on demand is not a new concept, but the complexities of this prediction have not only been hard, but they've gotten harder, right? We've got things like shifts in consumer expectations. People's preferences are more diverse. You may have customers aging in or out of the population, and you just need to be able to handle these. And this is really why companies like Celect are innovating and providing capabilities in this area here. So from the standpoint of how we're changing this concept of prediction, first off, Andrea had mentioned that earlier, applying this broad concept of AI to the large volumes of data and the very specific challenges that we face in looking at this data, right? So looking at more data sets, more granular, SKU, style, color, size level information at stores over specific time periods, but being able to quickly identify trends and let you react in real time, understanding the context of an assortment and what's going on in there, and learning from behaviors against that assortment there as shoppers walk into stores and buy new products, et cetera. And we're applying new methods just in the overall AI world. So when I look at this and I say a patented approach with Celect, one of the differences with our platform that we've built, so it's not just a single model, right? Anybody that comes up and just says, hey, we've built a better algorithm, it's one thing, that's not truly a differentiator. What's really different is that we've built a platform designed to use many different AI models and approaches, seamlessly switching between things like traditional machine learning, which we talked about before, this idea of deep learning approaches where it's better for classification and understanding what types of products actually are, a shoe versus a shirt. But we've also innovated in this area of this platform being able to switch between the right tool, the right model, based on the type of job being performed. To put a very simple example, you may have a great sledgehammer, but let's not use it when you need a picture hung on the wall, right? So the result of having this approach and a patented what we call choice modeling concept here, where we're actually looking at that context of what was in inventory in given locations when transactions occurred and understanding the implications around consumer choice and preference there. By combining these together, we actually achieve a fundamental advance in the accuracy and detail of the style, color, size level prediction at the hyperlocal store level over the appropriate selling lifetime after certain products have been allocated to stores. So it's just that more granular and accurate outcome where we can let you understand the actual localized demand at the very smallest level of the product. So we're taking that demand prediction that we talked before, we're taking this underlying platform, and this is the process that the optimization part of the exercise goes through. When we talk about optimization, it's really moving things around, right? Pulling the switches and levers and moving product, considering how products would do in one store versus another to maximize the given objective, sell through, margin, revenue. So we're considering all the factors that you see here. We're looking at that holdback percentage, we're handling collections, and then the output oftentimes is that since we're doing all this effort here, we're actually able to let the allocators focus on spending a little more time in the value add and strategic thinking. So this is a very common sentiment that we hear a lot. We hear a lot of feedback around using Select solutions, and this is one of the more common things that we hear after people have started using it for a little while. Okay, so we've been optimizing in the background. Let's take a look at what the outcome was. So I'm going to walk you through the results screen and give you a sense as to how you can look at the recommendations that Select has done. So the first thing is the results now are organized into 4 specific tabs here. I'm going to start at the highest level, the style color view. Here, if I look at this product and click on it, it's going to tell me for the 927 units that I had, how many are going to each individual store. So it's just telling me, let's look at a product, let's look at a style color, and let's see what stores it's being allocated to. The next tab, just pivoting around and looking at it instead from the perspective of a store. If I scroll down here a little bit, let's pick this hot climate store in Atlanta. When I select that store, it now tells me how many units of each of the 3 style colors that I had in this pool we recommend to allocate to this store. Next would be the detailed style color view. So slightly different. In this case here, I'm still looking at the style color level, but as I scroll to the right, we see more information. We're seeing out of that 927 units, I had a certain quantity of each of these 5 sizes. And if I select this here and resort, what I now am able to see is at the store level, how many units of each individual size of this style color has been allocated to store 29 versus store 121. So instead of using a average size curve by store group or even by store, what we're showing you here is really the outcome of applying a hyperlocal size curve at this store for this style color and giving you the output for this. The last and most detailed level is actually at the style color size view. So now I'm seeing an individual row for each style color size. And as an example, if I select this extra large size of this specific style color here, I only had 11 units available. So what are the best, in this case, 10 stores to put it in? Now consider that. I can't get the answer to that on it. So consider, for example, that the limited supply we have here, when I've identified the best stores, not just the highest volume stores or based on the volume at the class level, but for this style, in this color, for this size. You know, how long would that take you to do, not just for this one style color size, but for every example of things like this that you'd have to work on? It's probably more time than you have to spend in the given week. And that's really one of the things that we're trying to do, is take the hard things off your plate. Now, Andrea, so we just talked about some of the common practices of using averages and groups. Can you talk for a moment about what the difference is with our approach at Select?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm going to use here is a very, very oversimplified example. So we're going to talk about an example where there's enough inventory, first of all, and that there really aren't very many constraints, because I really want to sort of bring to light one of the things that is different. So, in a traditional allocation, some of the time what you might be doing is selecting to allocate based on a plan. So in this case, I have 4 different tops, and I have a plan which basically says, for volume group A, I'm going to send 10 pieces to each store. So when I do that, because I have plenty inventory and I have no constraints, what would end up happening is that every store in that store group will get the amount that was in the plan. So what I want to talk about next is really what will happen on the Select side. So first and foremost, when you start to look at these 4 products, basically what we're doing is, instead of looking one product at a time and saying what should I send of that individual product, we actually look across all of the products that we're allocating. So the first piece here is, you'll see your volume group A, and you've got store 1 and store 2. And so first of all, we'll look at which of these, for each store, which store is more likely to sell one product versus another product, based on any new trending information that has happened since that plan was created. Once you've done that, we then start to consider one store versus the other. So first and foremost, as I said, we look across the products, and then secondly, look at the propensity of a product to sell in store 1 versus store 2. So now when we take a look at the results, what you'll see is that the mix has actually changed. So whereas, you might actually have had one of your products is not being sent to store 2 at all, and the reason for that is that even though it was an all-store buy, it really wasn't going to sell well in that store. It was going to sell better in other stores. So that's one of the key pieces that we wanted to explain here, that, first and foremost, we're looking across products so we can change the mix of what really gets looked at the store. And then secondly, instead of treating everything like a volume group or store group, I'm actually looking at the individual stores themselves down at that size level.
Great. And what are the implications that we hear from our customers?
Yeah, so basically the biggest thing that we hear here is that oftentimes it's not really the decisions that at the top level that look a lot different. It's really the opportunities that are down at that at the granular level. So it starts to look at things like these all-store buys, or when I've chosen to do a buy just for particular stores. So to me, this is a very interesting kind of quote that we hear all the time.
Mm-hmm. Almost like working at the tail end of that Pareto curve to actually get a lot of improvements there.
Yep, that's right.
Great. So now the last step here that we've been going through is going to be actually executing on the recommendations that Select provides. And honestly, this couldn't be easier, right? So first off, you've got the very common format that you're probably all very familiar with. You can download all these recommendations, everything that you see here, in explicit detail as a CSV file. But usually what happens is people will click this button, they will punch it into their existing system of record for allocation, and they're done. They walk away. So we've gone through, I just took you step by step through the allocation process that's in essence very consistent with any type of allocation scenario. But what I'd like to do quickly is give you a sense of what a replenishment scenario might look like. Right, so same list of different subtypes that we've shown you before. It's another one of those very common jobs. We're going to focus on these basic or seasonal basic or core replenishment products that are already in store. They may have a longer life cycle, more than 8 weeks as an example. And there may be things like surplus inventory where you want to decide on holdbacks or other types of constraints that we want to take into account. So what does this look like here? I'm going to come back up, and instead of men's knits, I'm going to select women's denim bottoms as an example. I'm going to stay in the retail channel, get candidates. And what we've got here is a variety of different, some jeans are fashion jeans, right? They're for very specific times of the year. Other ones are core replenishment here. So what you may do on this scenario here is I'm going to focus on just the core replenishment as an example. I could select all or any other that I needed to group together. I see a large quantity of inventory across a relatively large size run, and I would run the process just like I showed you before. But the real, the point here is that since the rest of the process, just like we showed, instead of using the visual interface, this type of allocation, this entire type can just as easily be automated as well, where it just is triggered by inventory available, certain time periods, need in the stores, and the output comes out automatically into your existing system of record. Okay, so Andrea, why don't you take us through some of the key things that we've summarized so far?
Okay, great. To go through 4 key things. The first one is that in general, our allocators really know their business at the aggregate level very, very well. But the missed opportunities are really down at the granular level. And the reason for that is that people just don't have the time to get down and really drive the insights at that level. So typically what we're seeing on implementations is, all store buys is not always the best use of the inventory. There's always some stores that are going to sell it way better than others. Defaulting a lot of these products to the top volume groups isn't always the best option. There's oftentimes, a lot of opportunity in some of the other stores, which you saw in the demo example. And actually, sometimes the top sellers in a location can be the products that you absolutely least expect. So there's a lot of sort of opportunity out there for the data to kind of drive some of these insights. The second area that we kind of see as a big learning is that, a lot of the time, buy online, pick up in store, and these new models where you're shipping from the store is actually really skewing the demand for that store. So it really does matter. So as you think about the allocation, it really needs to be taken into account. The third one is that, the different sizes or accounting for size at the granular level really makes a big difference. Typically when you're looking at size, a lot of the time it's done at a size curve for a group of stores or a group of products. But, the ability to really go and understand these patterns down at the individual product level for a store makes a very large difference, and it all adds up. And then as Sean had said earlier, the biggest piece here is that the less constraints that you apply, the more room there is for the optimization to really run and do its thing. We typically recommend, as you think about constraints, to really use them to drive the merchandise strategy as opposed to trying to use them to drive what goes where. So those are sort of the key learnings that we have seen. And then just to summarize for everyone, to bring it back to the value, the benefits, and the time to implement, just wanted to kind of bring this slide up again. But as I'm doing this, I just ask everyone to put their questions in. I do see there's a number, so we'll get to that very, very shortly. So I'm going to leave this up in the background so that you can take a look at it as we go through all of this. So, all right, so let me let's start to look at some of the questions. All right. The first one, Sean, maybe for you. Most of our merchandise is fashion merchandise. How would you know what style color I should use as it's a new product, or what I should use for history?
Great. So one of the key inputs that we take is actual product attribution. Now, everybody's going to say, hey, our product attribution is not perfect. That's okay, right? We're going to be able to let the engine actually, that's part of that machine learning part of it, understand what are similar products in that class that sold last year. We can actually look at the attribution and then dynamically match that with products that are very similar and pull attribute level contribution to demand out of those to get a really good sense of, based on the customers that you have, based on your stores, and based on preferences that we've seen there, what the likely demand for that product is going to be. So we're going to pull out the history around those similar products and products with similar attributes automatically over the appropriate time frame last year, as well as reacting to really low volume early information on sales. If you've got it in a few stores or online, we're gonna be able to react to that very quickly.
Okay, great. All right, so this one is about constraints. What is the lowest level I can apply constraints? Okay, so you can actually apply constraints down at the most granular level. So one of the things Sean had shown in the demo was that, you can actually, apply these at a summary level and they'll go down. But if you want to make, any sort of specific tweaks and you're down even at the style, color, size by store, you can actually apply constraints in that way as well. So a lot of flexibility in that. Okay, let me just read through these. Here's another one. In our business, we only see 1 or 2 sales in a store in a week for a SKU. How would you handle that?
Great. So I'll take that one, Andrea. So, and if you remember, that was actually one of the points where I talked about that sparsity of data. So one of the actual underlying key patents that Celect has is a unique approach to be able to handle sparse data and fill in the gaps by looking at what we call side information. It's related information around whether, if it's transactions online, dynamically being able to understand purchases of that product in stores that are very similar, as an example, or online, or even looking at browse information. Using these other data sources to fill in the gaps, and instead of, for example, sales in a given store are either 0, 1, 2, 3, it's actually able to say that, hey, on an average week over this time period, you're actually likely to get 0.75 sales per week. It may not happen every week, but it'll average out accurately in the end. So this is one of the key underlying, it's really like a more technical thing, but it's something that Celect is uniquely good at. Okay,
great. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so the next one here is really asking, can I allocate ASNs? So you can actually allocate on shipping notices, you can do purchase orders, you can do DC inventory, you can even do sort of the pre-allocations as you're thinking about what to order. So absolutely, you can do that. Let me have a look. The solution seems really simple. How long does it typically take to train?
So the training time, part of the implementation of a Celect solution is actually working with our customer success team during the course of that implementation to put together a set of onboarding documents, tasks, etc., and to take your users and your team through that. But what we actually, as you see here, since a lot of the interface is both very simple and it's also designed to work with the data that you have and the products that you have, the learning process and getting up to speed actually happens really quickly, and that's what we've seen pretty commonly across all the customers using this.
That's great. All right, so let me just see. I think there's maybe one more. Okay, so I probably can just take one more. There's a question here. When the tool coexists with JDA, in brackets, no rip and replace, what is the function of Select in this environment versus the other tool?
Great. So really, it's not replacing JDA. It's not. It's really a supplement to the everywhere from the need calculation part through the actual input around what units should go to which store. So it's taking Select's output and working with JDA's existing integrations, processes to make the middle part of the process, figuring out and adjusting allocations as fast and as easy as you've seen today.
That's great. There's still a few more questions, but I think we probably, just to be respectful of everyone's time, we should probably look to end this. I did want to make, so for those of you who put in questions and that we didn't answer, we'll get those answers over to you so that you have those. But we did want to make you aware that, the next one in this series is on the 25th of July at 1 o'clock again, and Talbots will be sharing their story. So we hope that you can join us with that, and we will be sending out the replay of this for both after the webinar. So thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in a month.